Colleen will be making the housekeeping announcements.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, you want me to start now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Welcome committee members, liaisons, and members of the public to the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission Partnership Grants Committee meeting. Thank you for joining us. We will begin at 1 o'clock. We're using Zoom with a goal to foster a more inclusive environment and an effective meeting. If you would like to comment during the meeting, please use the raised hand feature. To use the raised hand feature by phone, dial *9 on your phone's dial pad to raise your hand and do the same to lower your hand. Please utilize this tool to virtually indicate that you would like to speak in order to help the chair facilitate the discussion. All LS, TFC, and committee meetings will be recorded and posted to the State Bar website. A friendly reminder that this is a video conference and to please be aware of your surroundings behind you. Zoom captioning is available. To enable, select live transcript at the bottom of your Zoom screen, then select Enable Auto Transcription. Some troubleshooting tips. For those using Zoom on a computer, when on mute, holding down the space bar will temporarily unmute. If you use your phone to dial into this meeting, please be sure your computer's microphone is on mute to avoid audio feedback issues. While joining audio video via computer is highly recommended. If an individual loses audio, then they can call in separately using the Zoom conference number. Thank you.
Thank you. So Crystal, is it you or Rocio who's got the point on this one?
I can take the roll call.
Okay.
Sure. So Iskin?
Here.
Vashelli?
Here.
Galkin?
Here.
Cruz? Lee? Okay. And then Justice Rodriguez?
Here.
Judge Yang? All right, and then our liaisons and presenters, Selena Copeland, Laura Brown.
Oh, here.
Looks like Melanie might be in the attendee pool. I think you'll be promoted shortly. Thanks, Melanie.
Is that it?
And then State Bar staff, Garcia Avalos.
Here.
Michael Chong.
Here.
Angela O'Hara.
Here.
Colleen Cito.
Here.
And then Brady Dewar. All right, and we have a quorum.
We do. Okay, that's terrific. Okay, are there any members of the public here who wish to make a comment?
There's nobody from members of the public.
Okay, very good. So let's move on to the approval of the minutes of our last meeting on April 6th. Any comment on those minutes? I will therefore move that they be approved. We need a second.
I second. This is Diana, and I joined just as my name was being called, but I wasn't a panelist yet, so couldn't unmute.
Great timing there, Diana. Way to jump in. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. You want to take a vote?
Sure. Vashelli?
Yeah.
Galkin?
Yes.
Cruz?
Yes.
Lee? Iskin?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, very good. Let's move on to item 4.1, an update regarding the 2022 partnership grants and partnership grants 2.0 and the 2023 partnership grants.
Sure. Let me just share screen. So we're looking at the same ones. All right, so just a reminder for our timeline with the upcoming grants, I'll have that on screen, but we'll share a couple of administrative updates not currently on the slide. So at the last meeting, the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission reviewed and approved the 2022 partnership grant carryover requests. Thank you, Jana and Jason, for looking those over in between our committee meeting times. Those requests are approved and grantees have until June 30th, 2023 to spend down those carryover monies. Any unspent monies after that grant period must be returned to the State Bar. The other update was regarding PG 2.0. Public Council had reached out to staff in April with an update regarding its guardianship expansion project. Again, this is a PG 2.0 project. So this project proposal initially sought to fund their pre-existing guardianship clinic team, as well as to expand the team by hiring an additional staff attorney. Although Public Council was able to hire the additional staff attorney in June 2022, that attorney left in January 2023. And in response to the staff vacancy, Public Council has since leveraged existing staff and volunteers and has reported to remain on track to achieve all of its grant deliverables. Essentially, all the salary funds that were previously allocated to this new role are now supporting existing clinic staff who predated the grant.
Okay. Is that the end of that report, Crystal?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
any questions on that? Are there any concerns about Public Council that arise from all this?
I can share it. Crystal, do you want me to go ahead?
Sure, thank you.
Great. So just in addition to looking at existing or current 2023 grants, wanted to share with the committee, knowing that members of the commission like to get an update if we're seeing any potential concerns across any of our other grants that you might want to take into consideration in deciding tentative funding recommendations. So with Public Council, other outside of partnership grant, other 2023 grants, it was raised to us that, and it actually went to the commission earlier this year, that they did experience challenges related to their federal grants. So HP3 formula, HP3 competitive, and CalHFA, resulting in returning of funds or reduction in their award amounts. Some of it related to just the fact, the nature of reporting requirements regarding federal grants, but they did also mention staffing transitions, similar to kind of echoing what Crystal mentioned in the report out for their 2.0 grant, and staffing challenges that also resulted in reductions of a couple of awards up to 44% of their HP3 formula award, 51% of their HP3 competitive award, and 18% being returned from their CalHFA award. So just wanted to mention that so you have that context as well, related to some potential challenges that they're experiencing or may have experienced with other grants from the State Bar.
Okay, appreciate that. But with respect to the partnership grant that Crystal just reported on, although they did have some initial problems or challenges in spending the money, they've now readjusted their
deliverables,
their program and their deliverable. Well, they're giving us the deliverables that they promised, but it looks like they've readjusted their spending plans. So the money instead is going to go to augment
Existing staff.
Yeah. So still,
so they are spending the money, and they are doing what they indicated they would do with this grant. Okay, for partnership. All right, but that's helpful. Thank you. All right, let's move on. What's next on the agenda? Is it the current 2020?
It looked like Erica, looked like Jason has hand raised.
Okay, sorry about that, Jason. Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask, I mean, I know we've talked about it in other contexts, but maybe staff can comment on how pervasive the retention issues that Public Council is experiencing across other grantees. Like, are we seeing it uniquely impacting Public Council? I know we've heard about it elsewhere.
Yeah.
And we've talked about it in the context of, the loan forgiveness projects and things like that. But I think it's worth highlighting the concern depending on how pervasive it is across other grantees.
No, that's a great question. I don't have that data at my fingertips. It definitely, as you mentioned, we've heard about staffing challenges still continuing, from the pandemic from the last few years. With Public Council specifically, just wanted to bring it to your attention, given the amount of money being returned and the impact of that. So not necessarily a standalone concern regarding the staffing challenges, but more so in terms of being able or having to reduce deliverables and or award amounts. Does that help answer?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Jason.
I also have a question. Sorry to interrupt, Eric. My apologies. When you kind of did that summary, it sounded like it there's kind of widespread staffing challenges at public counsel specifically? Is that, so it's not just the one attorney that they lost?
Correct.
Our specific grant. I mean, how many people, it does concern me in terms of just being a part of their funding generally, if they've lost a huge chunk of staff, because that kind of tells me that there's something going on there potentially.
Yes, I know that they reported to us that there was a transition in one of their leadership positions. I believe it was their CFO. And they did mention challenges with hiring attorneys in specific areas. A lot, I think it was like eviction. They're one of their, around housing and HP grants specifically in CalHFA. I don't have a sense of like overall across the organization, just enough to know that, we did see a shifting of staffing didn't impact deliverables, but in their partnership grant that Crystal just reported out on. So there does seem to be some challenges regarding staffing and transitions that we just wanted to mention as you kind of read through their proposals for 2024.
Yeah, I think it's good to kind of keep it in mind that they've had challenges on a couple of programs, but I think it would be a mistake to kind of conclude from this discussion that there's some fundamental problem at public counsel. I don't think so. It's a strong organization. They do a lot, so I mean, let's keep it in mind, but I don't want to overreact to this.
Yeah, I raised the comment, I think, more because it might be a pervasive problem across the board.
Yeah.
Attorney retention in particular, which for a lot of our grantees is a significant portion of what they're being funded to provide. So if they have turnover, then they can't spend the money, and that kind of is what public counsel is dealing with.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think you're going to see that we will see a couple of proposals that public counsel has submitted for the 2024 PG program. So we'll have an opportunity to look at that, talk about it in more detail. Why don't we move on to PG, to the 2024?
Sure. So I'll leave this calendar on just for a couple more seconds, just as to highlight April 6th, we have the initial calibration session. And since then, thank you all for participating in various and multiple calibration sessions leading up to our meeting today, in which our goal is to discuss and determine tentative funding recommendations. As a reminder, this is not a voting item. Like, we're just going to talk through rationale and sort of approach as we get the confirmed numbers available for distribution. So I'm just reminding folks about that. All right, quick overview about our 2024 partnership grant applications. In total, we received 37 applications, requesting a total amount of over $5 million. The estimated available for funding that we'll have for today's sort of scenario / exercise is about 3.5 million, which is our baseline baseline available funding. For reference, 2.79 million was distributed in 2023. That was because the partnership grants were undersubscribed, so we ended up distributing less than what was available. As a reminder as well, the 2024 partnership grants is a 12-month grant period. We're resuming this typical grant cycle, a little bit different than PG 2.0, which is currently happening and was a 21-month one-time grant. Overall, for the rubric scores for 2024, those ranged from 64.2 points to 91.8 points. And then we took the average score across all projects, which averaged out at a 79.5. So relatively high average across the board. I'll go through a couple of data points. This was also outlined in the memo that was attached for today's agenda, just taking a sort of a global sense of the proposals and applications that were submitted this year. 36 out of 37 projects are currently funded, meaning we have one new project in the pile. The range of prior years funded ranges from 1 year to 13 years. And then also wanted to highlight that the requested funding amount range is $25,000 up to $439,000, which is our one singular grant requesting that particular grant amount. As proposed, the projects would address 13 substantive areas, with projects mostly providing services in the areas of family and domestic violence, housing, and guardianship. So just a spread of those substantive areas. And then just another graphic, when you're looking at county-wide, the projects would span 16 counties in California, with majority of the projects serving LA, followed by Alameda County. All right. Before we jump into the 2024 approach, just wanted to remind the committee of its past approaches it's taken in making funding determinations. So for 2022 partnership grants, 2.58 million was awarded. As a reminder, all 36 projects who applied were awarded funding. This one we used a tapered decrease approach. That chart is available on the right on the slide, based on prior year's funding, as well as looking at the rubric scores. Additional considerations were given for geography, geographical diversity as well. And the funding range was 21,000 up to a funding maximum of 120,000. For PG 2.0, we awarded 3.88 million. 26 out of 28 projects were awarded funding. Those were 11 supplemental and 15 new projects. We just across the board had a 15 decrease of awarded amounts for projects who scored below the average. At that point was 83 points. And then 2 new projects were not funded because we looked at their overall rubric score as well as the available funding. And that range is much larger, from 4,000 to 300,000. Again, PG 2.0 funded both supplemental projects as well as brand new projects, and for an extended grant year period of 21 months.
So can I make one comment here? If you folks look at this chart for 2022, one of the prior, kind of grants, you'll see a lot of differentiation, fine differentiation based upon, the number of years, 1 versus 2 versus 3 versus 4 versus 5, et cetera. That really isn't terribly relevant this year, because this year we've revised the rubric to say that either a project is brand new, in which case it gets some extra points, or it's not, in which case it doesn't get any credit for being new. So you'll see that is kind of baked into the rubric here. Is that right, Crystal? Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, so we, based on the discussions from prior, when we revisited the 2024 scoring rubric, I think we sort of evened out some of the categories and then revisited and also changed sort of the approach for the funding priorities. So we're not looking at year by year, we're looking at new, we're looking at rural, and then we're looking at whether or not a project hits both of those parameters, just in a general sense.
And I think if you go back to the previous slide, I think of all the projects that submitted this year, it was either 1 or 2 slides back, maybe a couple. Yeah. So there's really only 1 new project this year, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
And then just as a reminder for the 2023 partnership grants, which are currently being administered, 30 out of the 31 projects were awarded for funding. One currently funded project at the time was not recommended for funding due to eligibility concerns. Because the total amount was requested, I mentioned this earlier, all eligible projects received their full ask amounts. Funding range for reference is 25,000 with a funding max of 159,000. I think I saw a hand raised, Eric. I don't know if Joe still had his hand raised. I saw it. I don't know if he had
I'm not seeing the hand raises. So whoever raised their hand, just talk.
No, it was just Joe. I wanted to make sure I'd been elevated because I wasn't seeing my picture. So I apologize for being late.
Joe, can you accept the invite to be elevated? I sent it to you twice.
I haven't seen, where does that come? It's never popped up.
Okay, I'll try it again.
There we go.
Okay, so I'll move forward with just for 2024, just presenting the staff recommended funding approach, which for the committee's consideration subject to changes or any other adjustments needed, or whatever you all are thinking. I think our ultimate goal here, as we have done in past years, sort of based on that pattern, is to fund as many partnership grants as possible that provide services varying in geography and substantive areas. So staff recommends a sort of a three-prong approach to get some initial recommendations or sort of initial leanings. One was to sort the projects by their funding priority score. Here we can clearly see which projects were prioritized either because they're new or are serving rural areas. The second sort of level is to sort the remaining projects by total rubric score. And then our third proposal is proposing a 175,000 as the top of the funding range for all projects, keeping in mind inflation, increased costs, and using 150 or 159 as that reference, proposing something a little bit higher as the top of range. And then some additional considerations for the committee would be taking a look at the number of projects funded per organization, whether or not the committee would want to limit that, as well as taking a look at some other areas for funding decreases, taking a look at the average project scoring below the average of 79.5 points. This might be helpful. I will toggle screens now to the spreadsheet. I think maybe all of you have seen.
Let's pause on that for a minute.
Yeah.
I mean, people kind of have any reaction? I mean, you have to see how it works, of course, but just in the abstract, what do people have any thoughts about this? One thing I have is that I like it basically, but on the number one, we're sorting projects by funding priority, prioritizing new and rural, which really means, as I've indicated before, prioritizing rural, because we have one new project. And then within one, I think I would look within the category number one to see if any of them have a low rubric score, because I wouldn't want to necessarily prioritize a rural project that had a low rubric score. So I think I'd want to take a look at that. I mean, otherwise it kind of makes sense to me, but do any other folks have any thoughts about this before we actually look at how it works? It might work.
Yeah, Eric, I just have a clarification. I guess I wasn't under the impression that we had totally eliminated the idea of seed funding and giving more priority to those programs in the first 5 years, especially because for a number of programs, that was the previous promise. If they applied in 2020, that this is seed funding for the next 5 years, and that it would be as secure as we could make it. At least that was the previous policy. And even if we are changing it, and we agreed to, and I guess I don't have the total clarity that we've fully eliminated that. I think it could come as a surprise to programs if they were expecting that, oh, we're in our first initial 5 years of funding, we might lose a little bit, but not be totally cut off, because we're still in the new program honeymoon, you might say. I'm not sure how many of those programs out of the 38 are in that range, but it might be something to consider so we aren't surprising those programs.
Well, we can't rewrite the rubric at this point, so we may wish to consider that. Crystal, do you have? Is it easy to get the definition of new from the rubric, just so we can?
Yeah, I can pull up the RFP right now. Let me see that one. I think just to chime in, when we had the initial calibration meeting back in April, I think we were trying to figure out sort of the parameters of how we would be approaching this, and that's why I sort of meddled it down to new, rural. If not, then you would get the one, and that's sort of how the spread looks like so far, because I think that was applied consistently during the calibration sessions. But I will say grantees were given notice of the updated RFP and the updated scoring rubric. We also had office hours for interested applicants. So these materials have been available for them to review well before like the application deadline. So it shouldn't come to a surprise, but there was notice. It was also voted during the commission meeting as well. So there's been several areas where we've sort of talked about the new rubric.
Okay, so they won't be surprised. That's good to know. I'm not sure if, I mean, I think it still mentions 5 years in there, and I don't know if we still want to weight that, but because I honestly don't know which is better in terms of accomplishing our goals with the partnership grant funds. But I did want to raise that before we dive into the thick of it.
And that might be something, as you mentioned, well, that the committee wants to consider when looking at the cuts or the funding recommendations on the score itself. It was at least scored consistently, just to confirm in terms of only projects that were brand new. That one project was given the new points. So just looking at the score standalone, and then however the committee wants to consider or further define or look at like newer projects.
You want to go to the spreadsheet, Crystal?
Yep, I'm going there now. Oh, I keep forget to share that. Okay, great. So this spreadsheet, so column U is where you'd be looking at in terms of the staff approach of that three-step approach and what that would look like generally, maybe as a starting point. So here we sorted by the funding priority scoring, which 10 was the highest, and then scored those projects, and then just went down and then sorted the rest by total rubric score, and then just filled in the rest to see at what point would we reach close to the estimated amount for distribution. This leaves about, with the scenario, it leaves about a handful. It looks like 7 or so projects that are not funded. Sorry, third layer is also taking a look at organizations requesting more than 175 and sort of just preemptively changing it to that top of the max. So that was this is how it looks like sort of applied distribution wise. If there's any,
yeah, I mean, I'm sure people have questions. I'll just start off with mine. So a couple of things. Let's look at the projects that are not funded under this approach.
That's these bottoms here, starting at row 44 with Betzetic.
Okay. And like I see NLS has a couple of projects in this bucket, but they are being funded on a couple of their other projects.
NLS will receive, I think, funding for a couple of them, but just to point out, CLA SoCal under the scenario, they submitted 3 proposals, but because all those proposals scored relatively low, none would be funded with this current scenario.
Okay. And we see public counsel as one of them that would have at least one of their projects not funded under this approach.
Correct.
But they would have another project funded, right? If you scroll up a little bit, I think
This is the guardianship clinic. This is the one that we provided the update on. This is the project requesting 439,000. But if the committee is amenable to the proposed cap or another proposed funding max, we can make that adjustment. I don't know if there were any reactions about sort of that third prong of our proposed approach.
Well, maybe again, I'll ask one more question, and then I'll shut up and let other people talk. But for example, cutting public counsel or cutting them down from their request of 439 to 175. I mean, assuming they should get anything given the comments that were made before. How would this impact their ability to deliver the guardianship clinic, do we think?
Yeah, so because we're only making tentative funding recommendations today and we're next meeting in June, that would definitely be a follow-up question that we would ask public counsel and then report back to the committee as it makes its final recommendations at the next meeting. So definitely, like, that's a significant decrease. I did want to point out 439, I think has probably been the highest that I've seen sort of in the years of seeing a 12-month requested grant amount. And it's actually higher than our maximum that we awarded for PG 2.0, which was a 21-month grant. So that amount just generally feels a bit high relative to the available funding.
So the column F is years funded.
Column F, yes, years funded.
Okay.
And then I guess you can see here with public counsel and legal assistance for seniors, 13 years and then 12 years, probably like in terms of prior years funded, these are on the higher end or probably the highest end.
And in the past, I think staff has reached out to see whether they would still want to fund at a reduced rate for the grants that are getting capped. Is that something that would happen after, or has that already happened?
No, it would happen after this meeting. I don't know if you recall, well, I think it was PG 2.0 was an expedited timeline, so we had to make the call during the thing. We do have several weeks before the next meeting, so that would be our questions to confirm and then follow up with supplemental information that the committee is seeking.
It does strike me as an enormous haircut, which it would be good to hear their honest answer as to what they could do, assuming that was a max.
Well, yeah, good point. So on that public counsel guardianship clinic, do we have details about what they propose to do? How many people they propose to serve, how many positions they propose to staff? Maybe we can get a sense for realistically cut.
So I have, and I don't know if this would be helpful in the context. One of our other additional considerations would be to look at projects that submitted multiple proposals. I have additional slides that gives an overview, just very high level of what those projects would do. I can go to public counsel first, but letting you know I have those for some of the other organizations as well.
Well, let's start with public counsel, then maybe we can look at some of the other ones.
Sure. I'm waiting for this to update. Sure. Okay, great. So public counsel.
Well, 2,000 individuals is aimed at. Do we have a sense for how many positions they were proposing to fund with their 439,000?
I'd have to take a look at the application. I don't have that top of mind. If anyone else, I know the PG staff team is here as well, so we'll see if we can pull up that information. Number of staff. Mike, feel free to speak up too if you have it. Yeah.
I'm looking for it right.
Also, how successful were they? And they must have submitted the 2022 evaluation. How successful were they in meeting their objectives for that year?
Yeah, so the evaluation data was for the 2022 grant year, and I believe this guardianship clinic was a PG2, the guardianship clinic expansion, which they provided an update on, what only reported on partial of the year. And as a reminder, it's a 21-month grant. I don't know if that will be particularly helpful to take a look at because it was 9 months out of the 21 months. And my anticipation was that they would say no, that those goals wouldn't have been met during the time period, but we could take a look. Yeah, so this is the guardianship Clinic, both for their expansion and then their supplemental grant. Column D's, the question is whether all goals were met. But again, you know, the anticipation is that it would be no, because this is a PG 2.0 project, and that doesn't end until the end of this year.
I guess, I mean, it would be one thing. I mean, if they fell, I guess what I'd want to know is were they way short, or were they just a little bit short?
Crystal, was this the one where they said they were going to do 20 workshops and only did one? Or am I conflating that with a different grantee?
Don't know top of mind. Sorry, there's been a lot of proposals. Let's see.
Yeah, it's a lot of manipulating documents in different databases. Sorry about that.
Judge Yang, were we together on that specific grantee? I'm trying to pull up my old notes, and my computer, of course, is freezing.
I am unsure. Let me check my notes also.
We'll just put a pin in that. I might be mistaken and confusing it with another grantee. So let me find out which one it was applicable to. I know that concerned me greatly with respect to that specific grantee, but I'm just not sure if it's the same one.
We were looking for the employee or the staff for the guardianship clinic, correct?
Oh yeah, that was the first question. The staff for the guardianship clinic.
Okay, so based on the budget that they put here, it looks like 1.95 total lawyers and 0.95 paralegals, so total staff of 3.85 FTEs.
Yeah. Did folks hear that? 3.85 FTEs proposed with that $439,000 requested amount for 2024.
Right. I mean, it would be good to know if they were one of the ones that just fell way short, as you know, we were thinking they might, but we didn't really remember. Maybe we could ask Siri.
I'm in the process of doing every IT professional's favorite thing, which is rebooting. So
I have their 2022 evaluation form. We can all look together. That would be helpful.
Actually, Diana, it was one of the projects that we looked at, the Public Counsel Guardianship Clinic.
So this was it.
Mm.
Yeah, look at that. See?
Yeah.
And the problem I had, well, that's a little different. Total.
Take a look. Maybe it's this.
For those of you who are on this call, they had promised to do approximately 20 workshops and had only done one. And then I'm not sure, it was a very, very small number that they'd actually done. They had served a decent number of people individually, but their, explanation was that, COVID, having problems pivoting to online, and the timing was really disturbing because it was like we were already into the pandemic a pretty significant way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was 2022, right? We were already well into the pandemic. People had already pivoted to online largely. Well, I mean, I certainly wouldn't be opposed to kind of a presumptive cut. I mean, given their requests being so far beyond what we've traditionally awarded for partnership grants, in excess, that is. And let's just have them respond.
I will say overall, the rubric score was 80.8, which is above the average across all projects. So.
I mean, also the 13 years, I mean, in light of Will's comment, I mean, gosh, and that's way longer than I mean, I guess we've funded other projects for that long, but public counsel is, you know, is well positioned to get funding. So I don't know. There are a number of factors that kind of add up to being a little skeptical about this one, to me.
Were there any
Yeah.
other? So, was that Will? Sorry.
Oh yeah, I wanted to echo Eric's sentiments there. And I think I am comfortable with the cap. I don't know if that's been established, but I think in the past we've always had a ceiling, and I don't think that should be a surprise. So at the very least, I think I'm comfortable with that and communicating that with the programs and seeing what their response is. The other, I guess I had two remarks on the programs that would be fully not funded. So, and I'm kind of curious, at least on one. So my understanding is at least a few of them are just going in, they would be going into their second or third year. They've had 1 year of funding and they'd be going into their second year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can scroll down. And so it strikes me that at least under the old format, and I'm not saying this is the right way, but I'll throw it out there, that the idea was to help get these programs on their feet, and to make revisions necessary to develop a more effective program. And I don't know why they scored low, but if it's because they are still refining what the program, it seems a little counter to our possible overall mission to cut them off at this point when they're still new in their funding, when other programs, you know, have 7, 8, 5 years where they, unless they're rural, should have had more of an opportunity to develop alternate funding streams. And then the other question I had was just, it seems like there's 3 remote services programs on here. Is there any other remote services? Because I will speak personally how difficult it has been for me to get to a courthouse, and how important remote services has been in helping me. And so I'm curious if there was something that made these programs really unattractive or score low when it seems like it's such an important service, or method of delivery might be a better way of saying that.
This is Jolie. If I can just add a thought to William's comments, which were quite thoughtful. Looking at the BetCetic Legal Services, for instance, that scored 71.2. And it gives, if I'm reading this right, no funding at all, whereas one row up is 71.3, a distinction that strikes me as very slim, maybe not very meaningful, and it's being fully funded. And that caught my eye, especially because BetCetic is an organization I'm sure is known to all of us, and that I have a lot of respect for. So I'd like to flag the question of whether that's a suitable result.
Yeah, and by function, I think I tried to give the caveat in past communications. We have over 5 million requested and 3.5 available. So I think we knew that there was bound potentially to be cuts or significant like decrease, like funding recommendations as well. So this starting scenario is really a starting point. So if additional adjustments need to be made, or the committee wants to look at additional factors, we're happy to do that. I have the full breakdown of the scores, but serving on the staff team who was here for every calibration session, I believe all of the rubric categories were approached and scored consistently. So that's one of the benefits of sort of the review process, if that's helpful.
So on the Quill's question on the remote, neighborhood legal services are at least a couple of the organizations that are impacted by his comment. I was involved in reviewing those projects. Neighborhood legal services submitted like, I think, 6 different requests.
Yes.
And these two, in my mind, were clearly the least appealing. And it's not like these are the only ones that offered remote services. A lot of these organizations are offering remote services. So just because they call themselves remote services doesn't mean that they're the only projects that are doing that. We are funding we are providing significant funding for neighborhood legal services for the projects that I think were just, at least when we reviewed them, not just me, but the others that were involved in the review, were just much better. I mean, there's a program called Ready for Trial, which is unique. There's a program, a guardianship program in the Antelope Valley, which was also, I think that was neighborhood legal services, that was also unique. These organizations that are not proposed for funding were just kind of amorphous and vague, and just not as well presented. So I hear what you're saying about remote, but a lot of these organizations that are being funded are providing remote services.
Thank you.
And my computer is magically working now, so I just want to correct one of my comments. It was for the 20 workshops promised, and it was 0 delivered, and it was for a guardianship project, but it was CCLA. So not the one that we were discussing, just so that everybody's aware of that too.
Is that community legal aid?
No, Central California Legal Services.
Okay.
Yeah. So my apologies, team. It was a different one. So those comments about what, their deliverance on their performances with respect to a $90,000 grant request, where we ranked the matter much lower than the 80 that this one received too.
Eric, Jason has his hand raised.
Yeah, go ahead. Sure.
So I just wanted to follow up on something Joe was saying about, not just where we're choosing to not fund, but where we are haircutting from remaining organizations. So it's probably worth discussing, does that go directly to scoring, or are we kind of setting some other standard for how we're filtering down to get to the number that we're targeting, where we know, like Crystal was saying, we know we have to do some haircutting, but how do we distribute that haircutting among these recipients? And I agree with Joe that 71.2 getting no funding and 71.3 getting full funding, it seems, it's difficult to draw the line there, even though we're not really strictly drawing the line there because there's other reductions going on.
Well, I mean, it's a fair point. I mean, when you draw the line, you draw it somewhere, and you're right. This doesn't appear to be terribly satisfactory. I mean, I guess another approach is we could take all projects that scored below the average, and maybe just give everybody a little bit of a haircut, and then we would have some funding available for those projects that are currently below the line.
I think it's just a matter of how, I'm okay with some of them who are on the lower end and having a threshold for nothing. But then once you pass that threshold, if we still need to save some money to operate within budgetary constraints, how do we distribute the remainder?
Well,
so that it's equitable.
Looking at the scores, where would you propose that threshold be? Because they're pretty close. Wherever you draw the line, it's going to be pretty close. You got 68.7, 68.8.
This is I don't know that I would have any argument for why this is a good thing, but it feels better if it's like a whole number as to where the threshold is, as opposed to, on a 10th. But I don't know if that's just me being, for lack of a better word, silly about it. There's not really a rhyme or reason to that, other than it just seems like okay, we draw the line at 70 or 71 or whatever, or the average or some other amount, as opposed to splitting between the two when we're really just like, it's literally splitting a hair. And that doesn't feel as comforting and give me the warm and fuzzies. But maybe that's the way it makes sense.
Well, if you drew the line at 70, then the project immediately below is, you're still freezing community legal aid SoCal, and they're 69.3. So I don't know. I mean,
I did want to just ask, I'm just a general question in terms of like equity and sort of what the committee wants to do, sort of in terms of the tentative funding recommendations. I think Eric had mentioned NLS has submitted 6 proposals. I think if that cut line is at 70, 5 out of the 6 would be funded. I don't know if there's further discussion to be had, whether or not the committee feels strongly about limiting the number of projects, just so if we're limiting 2 to 3 projects, for example, that frees up additional monies to fund further projects, or maybe some organizations who at this scenario, doesn't have a current partnership grant funded.
That's a really good point, because if we allow lots of applications for different programs, it's an effective means of kind of gaming our system here.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's the intention, but if you know that the more applications you get in, the more money you get out, it biases towards big programs or big, I guess, organizations, and against those smaller organizations. Yeah, I don't think I've heard that raised, but that is a concern. I don't know how to address it appropriately in this format.
So, Eric, if you don't mind, I want to share screen just for the additional information regarding NLS, specifically just because the volume of applications is pretty high. So if you look at all 6 projects requested, that totals to over $1 million, which is essentially a third of the total requested grant amount. So the way that this is sorted has the rubric scores from highest to lowest currently. Quick overview of each of the projects, prior years funded, and then sort of the overall estimated number to be served. I don't know if the committee is interested in looking at this data a little bit further, but wanted to highlight that out of 6 projects, 37, 6 of them are from the same grantee.
But how many do we propose to fund, given the proposal that you've just suggested?
Let me go back.
I think it's 5.
Yeah, I think it's 4 out of the 6.
Oh yeah, you're right.
I mean, we could maybe cut another one.
Well, that suggests that at some point we should consider a cap on how many applications any one organization can submit. Right. But in terms of these scores for today's purposes, I'd be inclined to set a numerical limit of 70. Under 70 is like a D, right? I'm thinking back to, you score in the 60s, that's a D. And I think it's defensible not to fund programs that get a D score. And I would adjust the amounts given to the folks above just pro rata to make funding available to I guess it's 2 additional programs, Bet Seneca and Neighborhood Legal Services, that have a score above 70.
So that would mean an additional 325,000 that we would need.
Well, I assume we cap one at 175, right?
No,
Not the 195. So
I just did that.
Oh, okay, right then. Sorry.
The other thing you could do is depending on how much it gets us, and we mess with the numbers, you could taper. So for example, you could say, well, between 70 and 80, you're only going to get funded 85% of your request, whatever. And so then you taper off. So as you move up the score chain, you get a greater percentage of what you asked for, until we find an amount that fully satisfies the budgetary limitations.
Yeah, I think that's a good approach. Maybe between 70.
I agree. Yeah.
Maybe you could play with giving everybody 90% between 70 and 80. I don't know how much money you would get out of that.
I feel like it's the least possible haircut between those two that gets us where we need to be.
Well, if we were highly confident in these scores, you could literally have the haircut be a factor of the score, right? So 81.2% will get a slightly lower haircut than 81%. Or the other way to do it is groups. Like anybody in the 80s, the haircut's so much. Anybody in the 70s is so much. If you scored 90 or above, then there's no haircut.
I am also supportive of not having to be buckets, but having it be, progressively distributed throughout the band, if that's reasonably possible. But I'm not sure if that's necessary to get us to the full amount that we need. It might be.
There could be some justice to just looking at the average, which is 79, and just saying anybody below 70, between 70 and 79 gets a little bit of a haircut since they're below average. And see if that gets us where we need to go.
I see a non-red number in remaining. Oh, wait, that might just ruin it right there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I got ahead of myself.
I guess just circling back to my question / potential concern, this scenario as well, 5 out of 6 for NLS. Just if the committee wants to go numerical, that is fine. We're just trying to think like larger picture. If that's fine with the.
Oh, I see what you mean. So that this would give, yeah, you're right. This would give NLS 5 out of 6. I mean, maybe we could just. How about this, folks? How about if we just drop one of the lowest rated NLS project?
I think funding for their programs is very generous. So I support that.
We're still over. I think there were some talks for additional adjustments. Could you, were we talking about that, or did we want to see this on screen?
So how much are we over now? How much do we need to cut?
We are over by about 150,000. And then just noting, Public Council, their second project under this scenario, as with the prior scenario, would not receive funding because they scored a 68.7.
What if you gave everybody between the 70 and 79 a 10% haircut?
Trying to see what the best way to mathematically do this on the spot is. 1 second.
Better you than me to do this.
That's here. I'm going down. Oh.
I feel like a little kid watching a magic show right now.
I think this is wrong.
Was working her magic.
That's not very good magic though. And then this one we need to get as well.
Can you restate where the 175 comes from that's applied to this handful here?
It was the cap we've used before in prior grants of one adjusted for.
It's slightly higher than the cap because the last round was, or the max last round was 159, and then the year before that was 120. So it wasn't not an arbitrary number, but we wanted to. Staff was comfortable with recommending it slightly higher, just due to sort of increased cost generally. We can increase the cap, like increase the max if that is what the committee. Okay, so 13,000 with this scenario, 10%. So we would be funding 90%.
Last year?
159 was the maximum that we funded.
Oh.
And yeah, in that scenario, we had more available than what was distributed. or yeah, so we had more than enough, so everyone was fully funded, and the maximum request amount was 159.
This method does not give me any heartburn. I'll say that.
And so in terms of the projects not funded under this scenario, how does the committee feel about, just highlight them just to, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 projects would not be funded under scenario, the one under W, column W.
The community legal aid is the only one that really gets really washes out on this one. Do they get any IELTA money?
Yeah, I mean, all of our grantees, this is a discretionary grant, so the IELTS and EAF is our threshold baseline grant, so they do receive that funding.
I think it's okay because community legal services is still getting the IELTA money. Neighborhood legal services has 4 programs that are being funded. Public counsel has at least 1 other. All right. So, and I guess, all right.
I think the only one that looks a little bit odd is I mean, I understand and I agree with why we did it, but the neighborhood legal, like skipping over the one neighborhood legal services, if you didn't understand the logic of why we did it with the other ones funded, it does look like, well, wait, why did they get skipped over? But I know why.
If helpful to know, Jason, so this particular organization actually has a history of submitting multiple proposals. So for PG 2.0, I think they submitted 4 and only like 2 or 3 were funded. So like, I think they also understand generally and have accepted, like, for equity purposes, the rubric scores are a tool to help sort of guide the committee, but the committee ultimately has discretion in terms of how they'll utilize it in terms of the funding recommendation. So I don't think they'll be familiar with the message, but I don't know if that's helpful to know.
No, I just think it's one of those things where I know Will and I have kind of beat the transparency item to death over a few times since I've been on the commission, but I feel like it's one of those things where it's like, here's why we skipped over this one, and just making sure that they have the context and it's reiterated. And when we document it otherwise, because if you just look at this, the dollar amounts, it does seem inconsistent with if you don't have that context. So I would just reinforce the context is helpful.
And I would say that the program that we skipped down to, the San Diego Volunteer Lawyer Program, that was a good program. I mean, its rating is fairly low, but I think mostly because it wasn't, well, was it new or rural? I don't know. I'm not sure why, but I thought it was a good program.
Well, their funding priority score was a 10, which is which was the highest out of, 10 was the highest a lot of those projects scored, and no one got a 15, which would have indicated new and rural. So. Yeah, any further discussion, or any other additional scenarios to take a look at?
Well, okay, so the thought here is we're still 13,000 over, but that's kind of close enough for government work for now, and just we're going to go back to the projects and talk to them, and maybe we can do the final tinkering in June. Is that the idea?
Yeah, so I know there were several follow-up questions identified for public counsel, but we would probably do the rest for those that the committee is tentatively thinking of, about 10% cut and seeing how it would impact those specific projects. So we will circle back with that information in June. Also, hopefully by the June, or I think we're anticipating by the June meeting, we'll have the final figure. So then it's a matter of tinkering during that meeting, the final recommendation amounts that will then be presented to the Trust Fund Commission.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments?
I guess I'm still, I guess community legal aid, SoCal, neighborhood legal services, public counsel, these are all pretty big organizations, and they receive a lot of other funding. Is that accurate? Is my understanding accurate?
I would say they're on the larger side of like just organization wise and probably access to resources. You know, but I think they'd be relatively like similarly situated.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'm just trying to understand the consequences. I think in the past, we've really tried to bend over backwards to partially fund programs, and especially based on the time that they've been receiving funding. And in this case, it looks like it'll be three or four relatively new programs that'll lose funding, and so haven't really got on their feet yet. But I do not know the answer of how we could possibly fund them, especially, you know, the lower, you know, 34,000 or for the consumer debt, or the 67,000 for consumer debt. You know, those. I'm of course I'm disappointed to see us have to cut anything, especially when it's in its infancy. And so I think I don't know the fix though of how we could possibly fund them given the constraints we have. But it does feel odd that, you know, really long-term programs are receiving a substantial amount, and we can't fund those programs. So I think that's how the rubric kind of washes out.
One potential pivot back, Will, that's contingent on their response. Perhaps we're going to get a response on the one guardianship program that at, you know, a fourth of the funding that they request, that they're really not going to be able to do that. And then we might have a little bit of a windfall to kind of readjust and give some to, you know, either a few or perhaps just one fully funded. I don't know, something just to kind of keep in the back of our pockets.
Yeah, I think that would be excellent.
Are you suggesting though that the amount we've currently slotted for public counsel guardianship of 175 might be further reduced, or?
Well, I think, Eric, you know, based on sort of the staff's conference with them after today's discussion, I'm just interested to hear what their honest response is in terms of their abilities to do that program with such a small percentage of what they're asking for. And I wonder practically if the honest answer is at that little funding, it just doesn't make sense for us to do it. And so I don't know if that's going to be their response, though.
Yeah, I don't either.
Yeah, they might be able to fill the rest of that bucket up on their own. But we have to wait and see. And I appreciate those remarks. I guess perhaps going forward, besides having a cap on the number of applications for programs, we might want to consider in the future. Also, I still feel there is value in favoring new programs for the first couple of years to allow them to get on their feet with the courts and refine their program. And maybe it's not 5 years, maybe it's 3 years, maybe it's 2 years. If they can't figure it out in that amount of time, sort of pilot programs, and trying to favor those newer programs and seeing if they can make it happen and find value and use our dollars in that way, and then prioritizing long-standing programs. Just my thoughts right now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Will. Okay, well, any other comments? Crystal, Rocio, and all the other staff folks, you know, thanks for your hard work on this. Is a lot of reading, a lot of wading through stuff, and to all the commissioners for participating in various sessions. Also, thanks to all of you. Not easy to make these decisions. All right, well, what do you think, Crystal? Are we ready to move this ship forward?
I think so. So just recapping, we've started by all of the rubric scores have fully funded those up until the 80 point, instilled 175,000 sort of top of ceiling, sort of top of the funding range, and then those below 80, we have a proposed 10% cut, decrease of their recommended amount. And then next steps would be follow up, get supplemental information, present that to the committee, as well as the final amount for distribution. And then we'll convene again and make any additional adjustments. So
great, and that'll be on June, just to be sure it's
June 15th is the next meeting.
And we also have a meeting on the calendar for July. Do we anticipate needing that in light of what we've done today?
The only caveat I had scheduled both the June and July is just the timing of when the Budget Act gets signed by Newsom. So if it doesn't happen before the June meeting, unfortunately, we probably cancel that meeting and make that sort of finalize the recommendations at the July meeting. It's the same purpose. It would just, I held 2 dates on everyone's calendars. So yeah, just a timing thing.
Okay, maybe Governor Newsom will find another $1 million and we'll have a lot of money.
I mean, there might be more available to distribute. We don't know. So we use our best estimate, and then we'll know for sure the next time we meet.
Maybe Ron DeSantis will just voluntarily send some money to California just to help us on these.
Eric is so optimistic today.
All right. Well. Is that it? Is that the agenda? Are we done?
Yeah, that was the. So sometimes this takes a short time, and sometimes it takes a long time. So I know we scheduled this through 4 o'clock. So if everyone's happy with that sort of initial leaning, and then that will follow up with the grantees. We'll touch base again at our next meeting.
What are we going to do with all this extra time? My God. All right. Well, thanks everybody, and we'll. Thanks again for your work.
Take care.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
See you soon.